How on earth do you coach Michael Jordan? He's the greatest player who ever lived, with an ego to match and a supporting cast of superstars who all wanted their own piece of the glory. Phil Jackson faced exactly this challenge when he took over as head coach of the Chicago Bulls in 1989. Michael Jordan was already putting up video game numbers, but the Bulls kept losing in the playoffs. The problem wasn't talent, it was leadership. What Jackson did next didn't just win 6 championships, it revolutionized how we think about leading high-performing teams. Welcome to the highest level. I'm Coach Evan, and I study what separates legendary leaders from everyone else. Today, we're kicking off our Championship Leadership Case Study series, breaking down Phil Jackson's leadership model, the principles, the psychology, and the practical strategies that turned individual superstars into the greatest team in basketball history. By the end of this case study, you'll have 5 proven leadership principles that turn individual talent into championship teams, whether you're leading a Fortune 500 company or a startup. Let's dive in. First, let's set the stage. Phil Jackson won 11 NBA championships as a head coach, 6 with the Chicago Bulls and 5 with the LA Lakers. But here's what makes this interesting for business leaders. He inherited teams loaded with talent, but couldn't win the big one. The Bulls had Michael Jordan averaging 37 points per game, but they kept losing to teams with less individual talent because they couldn't function as a unit. This isn't just about sports. This is about the challenge that every business leader faces. How do you get high-performing individuals to sacrifice their own personal glory for team success? Jackson developed a system that we can break down into 5 core principles. Each one is directly applicable to your leadership challenges. The Phil Jackson leadership model. Principle 1, mindful awareness leadership. Phil Jackson was famous for making decisions that seemed to come out of nowhere, but were exactly right for the moment. Here's why. He practiced what he called present moment leadership. Here's the story that shows this in action. During the 1998 playoffs, Dennis Rodman disappeared from the team and ended up at WrestleMania in Las Vegas. Most coaches would have exploded or suspended him or made it a huge scene. Instead, Jackson told the team before the next practice, with Rodman present, that Dennis had disrespected and dishonored their group. And then he started practice like nothing happened. Jackson later said, "Where do I get my ideas for motivating players? The answer is in the moment." Now, why does this matter for your leadership? Most leaders react from emotion or predetermined playbooks. Jackson trained himself to stay present and read what the situation actually required, not what his ego wanted to do. The tactical takeaway. Before making any leadership decision, pause and ask yourself, what does this moment require? Not what you planned, not what worked before, but what this specific situation needs right now. This is exactly what I see missing in most organizations. Leaders who are so busy executing their plan that they miss what's actually happening. Jackson understood that true leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room, it's about being the most aware. The key takeaway here, present moment decisions beat predetermined playbooks. Principle number 2, transforming me into we. This was Jackson's signature challenge, and I would argue his greatest strength. When he took over the Bulls, he inherited a team where Michael Jordan was taking 28 shots per game, and everyone else on the team was essentially just standing around watching. Here's the story. Jackson's first major move as head coach was convincing Michael Jordan, the scoring champion and the face of the league at this point, to give up individual statistics for team success. He told Jordan they would never win championships with him scoring 37 points a game. And there's a great clip in The Last Dance of Michael Jordan saying to Phil Jackson, "You're not going to run an equal opportunity offense now, are you?" And that's exactly what he was going to do. Jordan's response, even though he may have been a bit skeptical at first, he trusted the system. He went from scoring 37 points per game to 31, then to 30, focusing instead on making his teammates better. Jackson said, "My goal was to give everyone on the team a vital role and inspire them to be acutely aware of what was happening with each other." And I think it's interesting to note the triangle offense, which was utilized by the Bulls, is a strategy that aims for offensive balance, which I think is a perfect representation of this team-oriented philosophy Phil was trying to cultivate with the team. The result? Jordan became a better player, not worse, because the team demanded less from him individually while achieving more collectively. Now, why does this matter for your leadership? Every high-performing team faces this tension. Individual stars who could succeed on their own, but need to sacrifice for something greater. The tactical takeaway. Don't just tell people to be team players. Give them a compelling vision of what we can achieve that me never could. Jackson didn't diminish Jordan. He expanded his definition of greatness. This is the struggle that every leader faces. How do we get driven individuals to surrender their personal glory for group excellence? Jackson made it aspirational, not sacrificial. The key takeaway here: make team success more compelling than individual glory. Principle 3, compassionate confrontation. Phil Jackson never avoided difficult conversations, but he had a unique approach. He attacked problems, not people. Here's the story that shows this in action. Michael Jordan once punched Steve Kerr during a practice, literally hit one of his own teammates. Most coaches would have either ignored it or exploded. Phil simply kicked Jordan off the court and finished practice without him. Then, Jackson went down to the locker room immediately after practice and told Jordan, "You're picking on the smallest guy on the court." Direct confrontation, but focused on the behavior, not character assassination. Later, when Scottie Pippen refused to enter a playoff game with 1.8 seconds left because he wasn't taking the final shot, Jackson addressed it with the whole team immediately. He didn't sugarcoat it, but he also didn't attack Pippen personally. Jackson said, "Having a clearly defined set of principles to work with reduces conflict because it depersonalizes the criticism. Players understand you're not attacking them personally when you correct a mistake." Now, why does this matter for your leadership? Most leaders either avoid confrontation entirely or make it personal when they finally snap. The tactical takeaway: separate the person from the problem. Have clear standards, address violations immediately, but always preserve the person's dignity while correcting their behavior. This is what I see missing in most organizations. Leaders who either enable bad behavior or destroy relationships when they address it. Jackson understood that confrontation without compassion creates enemies, but compassion without confrontation enables dysfunction. The key takeaway here: have clear standards, immediately give feedback, and preserve dignity. That's how you get behavior change. Principle 4, VisionDriven Culture. Phil Jackson was a master storyteller who created compelling themes that unified his teams around something bigger than basketball. They show this at the beginning of the Last Dance documentary. At the first team meeting of the 1998 season, Jackson handed out a handbook that had Last Dance on the cover. He told the team this would be their final year together, so they needed to make it special. Steve Kerr said, "Phil always looked for a theme for every season. In typical Phil fashion, he had a name for it: The Last Dance." But here's the key. Jackson didn't just create the vision. He made sure everyone owned it. He said, before a vision can become reality, it must be owned by every single member of the group. When Phil Jackson took over as Bulls head coach, he knew that if he could get Michael Jordan to buy in first, the rest of the team would follow. Jordan was the leader and the best player, so Jackson spent the most time getting him aligned with the vision. Once Jordan bought in, so did the rest of the team. And the result of that Last Dance theme, the team played with urgency and purpose all season, knowing that it was their last chance together. Now, why does this matter for your leadership? Most leaders either have no vision beyond hit the numbers, or they create a vision that feels imposed from above. The tactical takeaway: Be a storyteller. Create a compelling narrative that gives meaning to the work, and then get your key influencers to own it first. Vision without ownership is just wishful thinking. This is exactly what I see in successful transformations. Leaders who don't just communicate strategy, they create stories that people want to be a part of. Jackson understood that people don't just work for paychecks, they work for purpose. The key takeaway here, creating a compelling narrative plus key influencer buy-in leads to universal group ownership. Principle 5, invisible leadership. This might be Jackson's most powerful principle. The best leaders make themselves invisible by empowering others to lead. Here's the story. As Jackson's relationship with Michael Jordan evolved, he started consulting with Jordan regularly to get an inside perspective on the team. Jordan, in turn, started taking younger players under his wing. Jackson would watch Jordan give impromptu tutorials to teammates in the middle of games, and instead of calling timeout to give the instructions himself, he let Jordan coach from the floor. Jackson said that kind of on-the-job problem solving was invaluable, not only because it sped up the learning process, but also because it strengthened the group mind. He also admitted his own limitations as a leader. Jackson said, every leader has weaknesses and screws up from time to time. An effective leader learns to admit that. And I think this is such a key trait when we're talking about being an influential and impactful leader. Eliminate your ego and admit your mistakes and let your people know that you're human. The result, Jackson created multiple leaders throughout the team, not just one leader at the top. Now, why does this matter for your leadership? Most leaders feel like they have to have all the answers or they have to make all the decisions. That creates bottlenecks and prevents others from growing. The tactical takeaway. Your job isn't to be the smartest person in the room. It's to make everyone else smarter. Admit your weaknesses, delegate real authority, and create leaders at every level. This is what separates good leaders from great ones. The willingness to make themselves less necessary by making others more capable. Jackson understood that invisible leadership creates the strongest teams. The key takeaway here is that great leaders create other leaders, not followers. Now let's look at this model in action. Here's how all of these principles work together in practice. Look at the Bulls' second three-peat from 1996 to 1998. This is the Phil Jackson leadership model firing on all cylinders. You had mindful awareness, Phil Jackson managing Dennis Rodman's antics, Michael Jordan's competitiveness, and Scottie Pippen's injuries with present moment decisions that kept the team focused. You had the me to we transformation. Jordan was no longer just a scorer. He was a floor general, making everyone better. Rodman embraced his role as the ultimate team player, despite being basketball's biggest individual. There was, of course, compassionate confrontation. When conflicts arose, and they did constantly, Jackson addressed them immediately, but never destroyed relationships. There was a vision-driven culture. The Last Dance gave everyone a sense of urgency and purpose that transcended individual goals. And lastly, you had invisible leadership. Jackson had multiple leaders on the court. Jordan, Pippen, and even Rodman in his own way, all were reinforcing the same principles. Notice the sequence. Vision creates the foundation. Awareness guides the decisions. Confrontation solves the problems. And invisibility empowers others. And the we mindset ties it all together. This is the difference between good leaders and legendary ones. They don't just use isolated tactics. They create integrated systems. In your organization, this is what it could look like. Having clear vision that everyone owns, present moment decision making, problems that are addressed quickly but compassionately, and leaders developed at every level working toward collective success. So there you have it. Phil Jackson's leadership model broken down into 5 actionable principles: mindful awareness, me to we transformation, compassionate confrontation, vision-driven culture, and invisible leadership. The bottom line is that Phil Jackson didn't just manage talent, he maximized talent. He transformed how talented people thought about success itself. He took the greatest individual performer in basketball history and convinced him that team greatness was more fulfilling than personal records. Here's your homework. Pick one of these principles and implement it this week. Don't try and do all 5 at once. If you're dealing with ego conflicts, start with compassionate confrontation. If your team lacks direction, begin with vision-driven culture. If you found this valuable, subscribe for more leadership case studies from legendary coaches. Next week, we're breaking down Bill Belichick and how he built a dynasty through systematic preparation and adaptability. And if you're a business leader who wants to dive deeper into these championship-level leadership principles, check out the link in the description. I work with executives who want to apply these strategies to build their own championship teams. Until next time, lead like a legend.